This video was brought to you by Brilliant. The last few weeks of British politics have been a whirlwind. After months of speculation about whether Boris Johnson would remain in office, Johnson finally resigned. But almost immediately afterwards, talk turned to a potential return. According to a report in The Telegraph, Johnson told a friend that he intended on returning soon, and many commentators noticed that his final words at the dispatch box are famously associated with the Terminator, whose other catchphrase was, "I'll be back." And the likely success of Liz Truss, widely perceived as the Johnson continuity candidate, has only added fuel to the rumours. So in this video, we're going to be taking a look at whether Johnson could actually stage a comeback, or whether this might just be more Johnsonite bluster. Now, Johnson's return might take many forms. He might try and stay in the job right now, return as Prime Minister sometime in the future, or return to frontline politics in some other position. Let's start with the first option. Johnson staying in office right now. Now, prior to resigning, there were quite considerable rumours circulating around whether Johnson would bounce his party and the country into a general election. Having resigned live on TV, it's now fairly agreed that even if he were to go to the Queen and call an election today, she would reasonably refuse under something called the Lascelles Principles. So, in that case, how could he stay as Prime Minister even if the leadership vote is already in progress and it precludes him from taking part? Well, by changing the leadership rules. Lord Cruddas, a Tory party donor, and former MEP David Campbell Bannerman have set up a petition on Conservative Post demanding that Conservative members get a vote on Johnson's resignation. And that petition has now been signed by more than 10,000 Conservative members. The Telegraph have also reported that Johnson recently told Cruddas, the same Lord Cruddas who set up the petition, that he, quote, does not want to resign and wants to fight the next general election as leader of the party. Unfortunately for Johnson's ambitions, though, this looks unlikely. The 1922 committee aren't going to change the rules as a result of a random petition, especially not one with just 10,000 signatures, representing around 5% of the entire party membership. It's also worth saying that it's unlikely that all of these signatures are legitimate, because it turns out that where the petition form asks for your membership number, one could just enter 0 and still sign, despite not being a party member. Now, the petition organisers have stated that Conservative campaign headquarters have sent membership numbers for verification, but unless CCHQ want to violate GDPR, they won't be able to confirm to the petition organisers who is and isn't a party member, which leaves this petition looking weak and the odds of Johnson staying on even weaker. Which brings us on to the second option, a second stint as Prime Minister. Now, this is technically possible. There's nothing in the Conservative Party constitution stopping a leader from returning, and the UK has had 2 Prime Ministers leave office and return later, Winston Churchill and Harold Wilson. The difference here being that both Churchill and Wilson didn't resign as their party leaders. They left government because they lost an election, and then spent time as leaders of the opposition. For Johnson to resign as party leader, be replaced, and then come back would require a perfect confluence of events. But it isn't impossible. The most likely scenario would involve the next Prime Minister, Truss or Sunak, losing in a general election to Labour, with their short premiership being dominated by inflation, energy price caps, and public strikes. If they were to then resign, Johnson would stand a non-trivial chance of winning the next leadership election by appealing to Conservative nostalgia for the good old days of 2019 and claiming that he's the only leader who can unify the Conservatives' disparate electoral coalition. Now, while this series of events is unlikely, it's not entirely impossible. However, this does all depend on the Privileges Committee, which is currently investigating whether or not Johnson's apparently dishonest comments about Partygate in the Commons amounted to contempt of the House. According to a declaration by the Speaker of the House of Commons, Lindsay Hoyle, If the committee recommended Johnson's suspension, that would trigger the Recall of MPs Act. Under this act, an MP can be recalled if 10% of the registered voters in their constituency sign a petition calling for a recall, and the MP is suspended from the House following the recommendation of the Standards or Privileges Committee for more than 10 sitting days. So, is that likely? Well, the House of Commons are incredibly strict when it comes to the disrespecting of it or the chair. Several MPs have been suspended for 5 sitting days for as little as disorderly conduct, with Keith Vaz, who was found to have committed a breach of the MP Code of Conduct and contempt of the House, suspended for an entire month. So if they do recommend a suspension for Johnson, it's very likely to meet the 10 sitting days threshold. A recall petition would then be quite likely, given that of the 70,000 registered voters in Johnson's constituency, nearly 65% of them didn't vote for him in 2019, and any recall petition would need just 10% of them to sign up. And if this did happen, it would basically be the end for Johnson, unless the Conservatives decided to parachute him in via a safe seat at the next election. But even this would be unlikely. Which brings us on to the third and final option: a return to frontline politics via some other avenue. Some senior Conservatives have floated the idea of Johnson becoming the next NATO Secretary General after Jens Stoltenberg steps down in September. According to Telegraph, a British candidate has long been tipped for the role because of the US's distrust around any European Union figures taking the job, given repeated suggestions of plans for a new European army. And to be fair to Johnson here, his stance on Ukraine proved to both be prescient and popular, and Zelensky has consistently praised Johnson for his efforts in Ukraine. The problem here, though, is that to become NATO Secretary General, you need the unanimous support of all members. And while the US might indeed want a Brit to take the helm, it's unlikely that many European politicians who associate Johnson with Brexit battles will want this particular Brit in the role, and would perhaps prefer someone else like Ben Wallace. Regardless, even if Johnson doesn't return to Downing Street, leaves Parliament, and doesn't get the NATO job, it's unlikely we've seen the back of him yet. Because at the end of the day, no one knows what the future holds, and Johnson is nothing if not unpredictable. Not least because it often seems that the decisions made by countries and leaders are at random and without any real purpose. However, if you'd like to be more logical in your decision making, then you should check out my favourite course on Brilliant. Their logical thinking course might start simple, but it builds, teaching you logical reasoning skills until you're solving problems which previously looked impossible. And you'll get used to that empowering feeling of learning, because Brilliant's not just about memorization and lectures. Brilliant teaches you by doing, using active learning techniques to teach you the principles behind otherwise complex subjects, and ensuring that you actually understand what's going on. Using this teaching methodology, you can learn about all kinds of STEM topics. That's algebra, applied probability, calculus, gravitational physics, and even cryptocurrency. In fact, they even have a new course from Kurzgesagt, which I have to say, I found very personally exciting and spent a lot of time playing with. Anyway, if you want to learn in a more fun way, then you should sign up to Brilliant. And the link in the description will get you 20% off an annual premium subscription, which is not only a great deal, but also supports the channel. So, thank you.